Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Now, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and notifications. Sadly, we won't be able to get all too far in the painting, but the work I did get done took quite a few hours, actually. Between mapping out the size of the dragon, and also you'll see me using a ruler, and I'm doing all these measurements, and I will get quite a few measurements wrong throughout the sketch onto the canvas. Most people might use a lighter lead pencil. I use a HB2. I know it smears a lot, but it works quite nice. You also see there's something on the end, the silver piece, and that's actually a piece of tape because I was trying to cut down on the shine on the metal piece. It sort of works. It would work better if it wasn't the clear tape, but that's what I had. Now here you see me come in at different angles for the tail, and that is because it is easier to move yourself or get the canvas turned the right direction to make a almost circular line or a semicircle, because your wrist naturally makes that movement, but when you're trying to force your hand to do it in an odd position, it just makes it so hard. Which it took me a long time to actually listen to those who were teaching me and literally just move around the canvas. When I first measure this out, the stand is just too small and it's at the wrong angle. What I really should have done to start with was actually put my vanishing kind of point for where the desk would actually sit, like the one that's below the stand, and then work from there. But instead, I decided to work top down and work against myself. It still actually works out in the end, and I do like how it's designed, and I like how the book looks, though it still would have been easier had I worked from the desk up. Now this was a small inkwell station. I was inspired by vintage Victorian pieces. At this point, everything is level, it looks nice, which, yes, I will mess that up later on. As I'm designing this book, I'm not really too sure what all I'm going to add on it. Maybe some protective end pieces. I even thought about adding a latch, but I didn't like how that looked. So I'll come back to that later. Now, I know I have this super sped up on the sketching part, but that's because I can only have 15 minutes worth of footage at a time. And this is a 4 to 5 hours time lapse of a painting I've done so far. And when I was doing this dragon, I decided to start by just simply blocking in the muscle groups and where light and shadow might be hitting this dragon. And to do that, I use a mix of gray, white, and phthalo blue. For the darker, colder shadows and for the warmer shadows, I used crimson.
Perfect example why you have to wash your hands every 2 seconds.
Now the current color on my brush, I was testing to see if it would come out looking a bit like a leather type color. Then I just simply piled it onto the canvas to smooth it out with a separate soft brush. As you can see, I've gone a little bit outside the lines, but I'll clean that up with another brush using just a little bit of water to kind of scrub it back into place. I added a little bit more of the copper colored paint just to give it a darker shadow type texture and color, and it seems to have worked pretty well, but I will have to go back up and lighten certain other areas.
Okay, I don't know if you guys can see the texture of this paint, but it is completely blocked. When this happens, I don't know what causes it. I know I can still use it to get some of the pigment out of, but it does not spread all that great and it stays lumpy and glumpy. As you can see on the brush, it is still lumpy and glumpy. Unfortunately, I need that color, so I'm going to use it.
If any of you guys know what causes that, go ahead and put that down in the comments for me, because I've had this happen to several different colors, from dioxide purple to burnt sienna, raw sienna, and even a phthalo blue. It did that, but that was a different brand. Now, originally I was just going to go in, do the full wood texture with this small brush, get it nice and detailed, but then I realized, like right there, I needed to get the whole thing in and blocked in so I could have the wood pattern going the right direction, or it was all going to be running probably uphill. And I really didn't want that, and I didn't want to have to fight it later on. So I switched over to this wonderful big brush, which allows me to put on a lot of paint in a short amount of time. Also, a good reference that I was looking up for a wood type pattern, I just started looking up flooring. Wood flooring at many different color variations. I decided to try and get an oak type look to it, but because I add crimson later for shadowing, it kind of reminds me more of a cherry type wood. Now, I'm not too big of a fan of this section. I'm not entirely sure why, so I will go over the highlighted pieces of wood with just simply a soft mixture of raw and burnt sienna to try and even that out. But that's after I put in the rest of the shadowy color that I've got on my brush right now, because I do not want to lose acrylic paint. In some ways, I do regret putting the little ribbon in there because it just blocks up the space. But I know in the end, I'm going to love having that ribbon come out of the book. I'm not sure if I'll put a pattern on it though or not. This was a ink tray inspired idea for on top of the desk, and I wanted to have a little candle holder at the same time, but unfortunately you can see where I completely made it off level, and I'll have to fix that later on, probably in the next video. Now here, I was actually going to leave this section for a different color, like an emerald or more of a stone type texture. But I had accidentally already started painting with the brown color mix for the wood there, and I was like, oh no, it's just not going to work right now. So, because this color will try and stain the canvas a lot easier, I decided to not deal with that hassle, because no matter what I did, that spot would just show through, and I went with a nice upscale wood pattern that would be on a very nice, expensive piece of furniture. And after this painting is fully dried, I'll probably go over several spots with a gloss finish, just to really make that pop, bring out a shine, and that will be my dividing thing between all these brown hues. Now, after I clean up the edges of this table, I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.